There's still another major leg up for the Bitcoin and crypto market, but why hasn't it happened yet? I thought the end of quantitative tightening on December 1st meant that we're about to see this massive explosion. Well, I have some key charts that every single one of us need to be paying attention to because it shows exactly what's going on and what to expect, especially going into Christmas, but more importantly into 2026. And has the alt season even happened yet in this cycle, or is it still yet to come? Well, stay tuned, drop a comment down below, let me know what you're thinking, and stick around because I've got the charts in the next few minutes. It's going to show you exactly what's going on. Before we dive into those charts showing the key signal about what's coming, I wanted to dive into the Bitcoin chart and break down what I saw last Sunday and exactly how it's playing out, because it's actually more bullish than it feels. While everybody's crying, the sentiment's so bad, and we see it on the extreme fear and greed index right now, but the price action is still maintaining higher low, higher low. And this is that rejection that we talked about from this previous trend line of support that's now flipped to resistance. That's also in line with all of this previous liquidity in this zone. We got the rejection, formed the higher low that I outlined last week. We actually made another impulse to the upside with this interesting wick on the Binance chart. It's not on the other charts. You can see Bitstamp, we don't have that. You can also see here on Coinbase, we didn't get that. But on the Binance chart, we did get that wick up. But just looking at the candles, higher low, higher low, and here we are at that crux of the situation. Can we get back above, or do we have more moves to the downside to look for? Well, it's very important to watch on the daily chart. We do have the RSI rejecting at that key pivotal 50 line. Now, why is that important? I break it down a lot on the Discover Crypto channel, but this is essentially when price on the daily and above is being rejected or being maintained below 50. That means weakness is in control. We want to see the RSI, not just price go up. You want to see the RSI break above this and at some point find support and continue up. We do have positive money flow though. And then on the MACD, we do see that this is arcing to the upside, but it's looking a little bit neutral at the moment. But we got to stay tuned because going into later this week, you got the FOMC with the Fed rate decision. And all of this is predicated on what's going on with the jobs reports, which is coming in weaker than expected, but also looking at inflation. And we can see in the data that, you know what, long-term inflation expectations reach new lows since the Trump tariffs. So some of that fear about the impact on what it was going to, have in inflation is starting to be mitigated a bit. It's starting to come back a bit. So this may be a feather in the cap of that rate cut, and we can see it on this chart from Polymarket. The major swing, I mean, look at this, 25 basis point cut, over 90% chance, came all the way down here to as low as 22%. And now we're back up here in that 94, 95 percentile likelihood of getting that rate cut. But what about the end of QT? Are they still rolling off the balance sheet? Because after all, global liquidity going up is one of the biggest drivers to bringing risk back into markets, AKA Bitcoin and altcoins, seeing that pump that we all so desperately want. And this is what I'm talking about. We can see quantitative tightening ending. They told us December 1st. But what we really want to look at over the next quarter and into the second quarter of 2026 is this red line right here, rounding out as it is, but starting to tick up. And is the tick up going to be a slow tick up like we're seeing here, or are we going to see a massive explosion like we saw right here? Now consider this maximum uptick right here, this impulse on the Fed balance sheet had a lot to do also with what happened during COVID, where we had the entire world economy shut down. So I'm not expecting necessarily something this aggressive. But looking back into 2013, 2014 cycle, we had that flipping from quantitative tightening into quantitative easing, QE, and you can see the correlation here of the massive upside price action that followed. Now, considering this is rounding out, also looking at just the histogram here, this is rounding out back to that zero line. It's been telegraphed that they're going to end QT and actually get QE, money printing, money buybacks into the system, which would really be a major impulse for the bulls going into 2026. But is it a good thing? Because when we see QE, it might not be the next stop. This is Nick Crypto from Coin Bureau, and he kind of highlights it. Historically, the sequence is QT, rate cuts, rule tweaks, crisis, and then QE. We're only at the first step now. So as bullish as I want to be that we're going to get this immediately, we're going to have an absolutely bullish end of the year, very bullish January. It may not happen. I think one of the things we need to pay attention to is that there's hyper awareness now comparatively to what we saw back in 2020, and especially comparing to back to 2013. So I feel like there's a lot more basically leading indicators. People are layering in, preparing for what's to come, especially looking at the quantitative easing that's happening in Japan, that's happening in China, that's happening in the EU. And of course, the US is soon to follow. So it's not just going to be the US having that QE. I do think we're going to start to see this round out. The question is going to be, do we get that ultimate upside in the near term, or is it going to be somewhere, in the first, second, maybe even third quarter of 2026? Because looking at it right now, but I thought QT was supposed to end December 1st. That's what they told us. And we see this is still in a steady decline. Now, this is looking back 1 year, but we really want to start seeing things telegraphed with, basically money coming back into the market, especially rolling back onto the balance sheet. If that happens before Christmas, I think we're going to start seeing that reflected very quickly in the Bitcoin price. And then, later on down the line, altcoins as well. If it doesn't happen until January, maybe even February, where you start seeing this really round out, then that can be a very understandable reason why we're getting this delay and the bullishness that everybody wants. Now, is the bull really over? Because when you're looking at this, the altcoin market cap, look at this summer rally 2025. We had this massive broadening wedge that tested the bottom, the top, the bottom, and then came back up, rejected, broke out, and then had this absolute boom season that came all the way up through here. And considering what we're seeing for Bitcoin sitting right on the edge of glory, meaning Bitcoin breaking through this zone, we can also look back at that altcoin chart right here. The altcoin market cap saw a beautiful broadening wedge here that basically tested the bottom, tested the top multiple times, but then rejection, breakout. We see this almost an identical repeat here, stretched out over a much longer time frame. And additionally, when we look at the altcoins, do you really think that there's going to be absolutely zero alt season this go around? Or is it more likely that maybe things are just extended as the global reshuffling is happening, as we're seeing everything, gold running away, silver running away. We're seeing issues in the Japanese bond market, and there are cracks in the system, but it seems like the Fed and it seems like central banks the world over do everything they can to come up with new mechanisms to make sure the economies, the stock markets are still performing very well. So I'm fairly confident they're going to find some way to plug that hole. And when you look at the altcoin market, you see this massive oscillation, swing up, swing to the downside on the MACD. This is just now curving back above that zero line, it looks like, and then also expanding. We can see that by the green candles here on the histogram getting larger and larger, and this also expanding. In addition to that, we see the RSI and this persistent downtrend over this whole year. And then what happened? Boom. And in addition to that, we see the RSI, the strength index, since September really just persisting to the downside. But we've not only broken out of this trend, we've actually come back and retested this, confirming the breakout and getting back above that notable 50 line like we just mentioned before on Bitcoin. So we have the RSI actually breaking out of a trend, confirming that breakout. We have the MACD rolling back to the upside. We have the price action breaking out of a multi-month trend and looking like it wants to take that leg higher. So the question is, when we're looking for quantitative tightening ending, quantitative easing coming in, maybe something else breaks, but it's all a setup for higher in 2026, in my real honest opinion. You got to do what's right for your portfolio. You got to do what's right, making sure that you're not just trading on investment advice or investing on trading advice. Do what's right for your portfolio. But I do think this rounding here, understanding that something else may break, but knowing that this balance sheet isn't going to contract forever, everything's been telegraphed. So when we're looking at Bitcoin, when we're looking at altcoins, everything is right now on the horizon. I think 2026 is going to be super bullish. I would be absolutely beside myself if we get that opportunity that we've highlighted multiple times, getting price action. If this does reject and come down here, maybe that's the crisis that happens before QE. But I think we'd all be a lot happier if the bulls maintain how we're doing right now. We see the RSI break out of this downtrend as well. This is on the 3-day chart and make its headway up in here. But if Bitcoin gets above this zone here, retests on 100 and tackles up here. The next zone we're really going to be watching is about the 109 and then up here about 116. Those are the gateways we're looking at, but I'm super bullish. I'm super excited about what's to come in 2026. Make sure you're paying attention this week on Discover Crypto. We're going to be breaking down exactly what's going on with the Fed interest rates and also other things that are impacting the global financial sector. But my question to you is, what do you think? Do you think it's really over for Bitcoin, for altcoins, for risk assets, or do you think we're going to get a bit of a boom season in 2026? Well, you can only bet with the way you're investing. So make those determinations. Drop a comment down below and we'll see you in the next video.